Okay, so get this. Breastfeeding.
Hmm.
I was reading this research by Dr. Franklin Fernandez,
Yeah.
and he's got some, well, let's just say he's got some pretty interesting thoughts on breast milk.
Yeah. So what?
He calls it, get this, a complex symphony of nutrients.
Symphony.
Yeah, a symphony. You know, I'm a sucker for a good metaphor.
You are.
So what's the deal with breast milk? Why is it so, I don't know, special?
It's like,
Yeah.
well, think of it this way. You know how everyone calls it liquid gold?
Right, right.
Well, it kind of is.
Yeah.
Especially that first milk, colostrum,
Okay, colostrum, yeah. What's the big deal with that specifically? Everyone always says it's like super important.
It is, like, incredibly important. It's packed with, what are they called? Immunoglobulins. They're like antibodies.
Antibodies. Okay.
So it's like this immediate protection right when they're most vulnerable.
Wow. So like their first line of defense.
Totally. Like a superpower boost, especially for their, well, everything really, but their little tummies and lungs are still developing so much at that point.
That's wild. So are you saying that like as the baby grows, the milk actually changes with them?
Yeah. It's crazy, right?
That's insane.
Like nature's software update or something.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
That's incredible. But I've always heard that some mothers just don't produce enough milk.
Right.
Does he address that at all?
Oh, absolutely. He says that's a huge misconception. Like, parents will freak out if the baby's crying, assuming it's hunger. But babies cry for like a million reasons.
True. Very true.
He talks about how if you look at the growth charts, most babies, like the vast majority who are breastfed, are totally thriving.
So it might not be a supply issue after all then.
Exactly. It's about understanding those other cues, figuring out what the baby needs.
That makes sense. It's funny though, because then you have this whole other thing where people think formula is somehow like better.
Oh, yeah. That formula is like the magic solution.
Right. Like somehow it's more advanced or something.
But Dr. Fernandez, he cites all this research showing that formula, especially in those first 6 months, can actually lead to more digestive issues.
Really? Why is that?
I guess because it's just not as easily digestible.
Huh. So I guess it's not a perfect substitute then.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Formula has its place, for sure, but it's not this like magic bullet or anything.
Yeah,
It's a personal choice. You got to weigh the options and see what works for your family.
for sure. And what about if someone can't breastfeed? Or chooses not to, for that matter? Does he talk about that?
He does. He's all about like informed decision making,
Oh, good.
working with your doctor, really understanding the implications and all that.
It shouldn't be about judgment.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Support and good information. That's what matters.
I like that. Because everyone's situation is so different.
Exactly. Oh, and speaking of unique, we should talk about the benefits for the mother, too.
Oh, totally. It's not just about the baby. Yeah, for sure. It's like we focus so much on the baby, we forget that mom's going through it too.
Tell me about it.
So what about mom? What are some of the benefits Dr. Fernandez talks about?
Well, he hits on the usual stuff first.
Okay.
Like breastfeeding helps your body recover faster after birth, like how it helps your uterus shrink back down.
Right, right.
But then he gets into some really interesting stuff.
Like what?
Okay, so get this. He says breastfeeding can actually lower a mother's risk of certain cancers.
Whoa, really? Like what kind of cancers are we talking?
Breast cancer, ovarian cancer, those are the big ones.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's not just getting your pre-baby body back. That's long-term health we're talking about.
Exactly. And that's not even all of it. There are like psychological benefits too.
Really? It's like what?
He talks about how there are studies that show a connection between breastfeeding and lower rates of postpartum depression.
Oh, wow. That makes sense, I guess. I mean, those hormones are crazy, right? And that bond with your baby has got to be, like, super powerful.
Right. It's like this whole other level. Like, he talks about how breastfeeding is not just physical. It's emotional, mental, even, like, spiritual for some people.
It's true. It's like this whole intricate dance between two people.
Yeah.
And we're only just starting to understand it all, you know?
Totally. But we got to be real. It's not always sunshine and roses either, right?
No. Tell me about it.
Right. There's a reason people joke about those early weeks, but that's why he spends so much time on like practical tips and stuff.
Oh, good. Because knowledge is power, right?
Right. Especially at 2 a.m. with a screaming baby.
Ah, yes. So what kind of advice does he give?
Well, he's really big on this thing called breast compression.
Okay, I've heard of that, but honestly, I have no idea what it is.
So say your baby is like falling asleep or not sucking as well.
Okay, yeah.
It's basically where you use your hand to Well, compress the breast to get the milk flowing better.
Oh, so you're like giving them a little help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of helping, have we talked about pumping yet?
Oh, pumping. That's like a whole other beast, isn't it?
It can be, but Dr. Fernandez is like a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
He says it's the best way to extend the benefits of breast milk, even when mom and baby are apart.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like if you're going back to work or just, need a break.
Exactly. And he's really big on storing it properly. Did you know breast milk can last in the fridge for like 5 days? And you can freeze it for months.
Get out. Seriously. But do all the good nutrients and stuff stay good after being frozen for that long?
Yep. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
That is really cool. It's like having a superpower pantry or something.
Right. Okay, another thing he talks about is feeding on demand.
Oh, so not sticking to a schedule, just letting the baby decide?
Right. He says that following your baby's cues is way better than, having them on some strict timetable.
Interesting. So it's more about trusting your baby's instincts.
Exactly.
Huh.
And while we're talking about instincts, we got to talk about how the baby latches on.
Oh, right. The latch. Everyone always talks about that.
A good latch is so important. It's not just about the baby getting enough milk, but it's also about mom not being in pain,
Oh, yeah, for sure. No one wants to be uncomfortable.
Right. And to avoid that, he really emphasizes self-care for the mothers.
Yes. Moms need love, too.
Right. And I'm not just talking about, bubble baths and stuff, although those are good, too.
Right.
He's talking about the basics.
Like getting sleep.
Ugh.
Which is, impossible with a newborn, let's be honest.
I know, right?
Right.
But it's so important. And staying hydrated.
Water, water, water.
Yes. Breastfeeding uses up a ton of your fluids, so you got to replenish constantly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's food.
Yeah, of course. You're feeding a whole other human.
Right. So making sure you're getting enough calories and nutrients is super important.
So it all comes back to that whole holistic thing.
Totally. It's all connected. You're taking care of yourself so you can take care of the baby.
Mind, body, and spirit.
Exactly.
It really is. It's such a partnership,
For sure. And when you realize that, it's so much easier to find the joy in it. You know what I mean?
Totally. Well, I've got to say, I'm so glad we did this deep dive.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, this Dr. Fernandez, he really gets it,
He does. He's really challenging all those old ideas.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about? Asking those tough questions and really digging deep.
Totally. We got to stay informed.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something as important as this.
100%.
Yeah.
So before we go, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from all of this?
That's a good question. I think the main thing is just how complex it all is. Breastfeeding, it's not just one thing.
Right.
It's biology and emotions and even societal pressures,
Yeah, totally. And sometimes it's okay to just let go of trying to do everything right and just focus on what works for you, right?
Absolutely. There's no right answer. It's your journey.
Right. So well said. And whether you choose to breastfeed or use formula or do a little of both, the important thing is that your baby is fed and loved.
Exactly. That's what matters.
Okay, well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up.
Okay.
I hope everyone out there listening learned as much as I did. What do you think? Have you run into any of these myths yourself? Share your experiences with us online. We want to hear from you. And until next time, happy diving.
Bye, everyone.